Uncle Abaddon, or as some say Abaddon. I've often wondered about where we get our ideas concerning Satan's powers. When I was an evangelical Christian, most people would speak about Satan having powers that almost rivaled God's power. They seemed to believe that he was omnipresent and would persecute Christians all around the world at the same time. Anytime I'd ask if they thought it was Satan himself or it might have been just a demon, many thought it was Old Scratch himself. He was often said to have something just short of omniscience. He knew what was going to happen, just not as perfectly as God did. For instance, he knew quite a bit about Job, but somehow not that Job would ultimately persevere. He knew to hide dinosaur fossils in the rocks and that someday they would be found, and that godless atheists would use that to fool others into not believing in God. They also believed that he knew one day God would be victorious and that he would be defeated, but his evil nature kept him from just giving up. I never quite understood that. Many also seemed to think he was close to omnipotent, but that God was ultimately more powerful. My question is, are any of these powers of Satan, explicitly or even implicitly in the Bible? Do they come from non-canonical church writings, or is much of what Christians believe about the father of lies just myth? I think it comes from Zoroastrianism. As I've said a bunch of times here, answering not your very interesting question, but a related one, Jews were trying to solve the new problem of theodicy. Originally, they'd believed that Yahweh was beyond human standards of good and evil, couldn't be held to account. Job says that, for instance, and though it's also... It's like it's affirming an older view against this later view of moralism, because eventually, under the influence of the prophets who moralized religion and said sin is not merely ceremonial infraction, it's moral as well. A moral wrong counts as a sin against God, a new idea, and therefore that meant God must be a real moral guy. And so holiness came to mean moral perfection. Not just awesomeness and otherness. Well, once that happened, you had the problem of theodicy. Wait a minute, how can God be good and have created a world like this? How can God be in control of the world when such terrible things are happening all the time? The Zoroastrians had already come up with an answer to this, and Jewish thinkers encountered Zoroastrianism during the exile, and the Zoroastrian view was, all right, God would eradicate all evil right now if he could, but he can't. Isn't that, that's a little frightening. God's power is limited, but isn't that better than saying God could do it, but he doesn't care to? Let's stick with the idea that he's doing his best. Isn't that a more coherent, understandable notion? That God is all for the right and is working against evil, but nonetheless, obviously, evil is still occurring, so guess he can't quite do it yet, and he needs us to fight on his side. And so all ethical endeavor in Zoroastrianism was striking a blow on behalf of Ahura Mazda, the wise lord. But evil people were fighting for Ahriman, the evil anti-god, the lord of darkness, and he was terrorizing the world on his own. And their belief was dualism, that Ahura Mazda and Ahriman were engaged in a 12,000-year battle in the earth, and good and evil. And eventually, because of his wisdom, Ahura Mazda would prevail. There was no doubt about that, but we're still in the battle. It's not going to be easy. It's very much like when Oscar Kuhlman said that the idea that in the New Testament that Christ has defeated Satan, and yet there is still evil in the world. He compared it to D-Day versus VE Day. On D-Day, we made the decisive victory against the Nazis, but the war wasn't over yet. There was still a lot of mopping up to do, and that's what's going on now. The eschatology has been inaugurated. The kingdom of God has come, but in a sense, not quite yet. It still has to be, evil has to be mopped up. Well, that's not that much different, really. I mean, you can't both say Zoroastrianism and Coleman's understanding. Both are saying that, yeah, the victory is assured, but it's not going to be an easy ride. It's no bed of roses till then. So not all that strange, even traditionally, I suppose. But theodicy, the other end of it, the beginning, how do you square it with God being righteous? And they said, well, Satan, the character who is God's right-hand man, who conducts his sting operations and weighs the hearts of those who profess loyalty to God, but perhaps are not. And that's what Satan does, right? He tests David and Job and the high priest Joshua in the book of Zechariah. And he's doing it because he's zealous for God. And, he gets melded with Ahriman and becomes the enemy of God. The Satan, Hasatan, means the adversary, meaning a kind of courtroom adversary, an accuser. But he comes to mean, the name comes to denote the adversary of God. In fact, in 2nd Enoch, he's called Sethanael, the enemy of Elohim, not the original notion. Well, this didn't quite work because they couldn't, being monotheists, posit ditheism as the Zoroastrians did. So they said, well, okay, he was an archangel whom God created and who fell because of his pride. Yeah, of course, that didn't really solve the problem. It just pushed it back a major step, right? Because then how did God allow Lucifer to fall and become Satan? But they figured it was a step in the right direction. And according to Zoroastrianism, Ahriman was darn near as powerful as Ahura Mazda. He was like a second god, pretty close to the first one. And that's the way people view Satan these days. He's everywhere. He's on your case all the time. I'm sure you heard for years, as I did, people saying and meaning, Satan tempted me to have that extra piece of chocolate cake. I think of this great line in the movie The Exorcist. I don't think it's in the novel, but maybe it's in the novel, not the movie. I guess that's right. When Reagan's mother is explaining the possession to Father Karras, and at first the priest doesn't believe her. He says, you're saying Satan is possessing her. That's like saying that you're Napoleon. I mean, that sounds like just insane delusions of paranoia, right? Even according to the Christian story, there are loads of demons, right? If you say it's Satan, you're just fantasizing. What are the chances Satan is going to be spending his efforts on one little girl? And then, of course, it turns out the woman just doesn't know the real deal, and it is a subordinate demon, Pazuzu, who was a Sumerian wind and plague god. So the dilemma is a false one, but I think it's the same way. Wait a minute, you're telling me that the Prince of Darkness, Satan himself, cares whether you're not sticking to your diet? He's trying to get you to not return the too much change the cashier gave you. Satan is concerned about this. Well, if you say he is, then you're saying, well, Satan knows the birds on 1,000 trees. Not one sparrow falls to the ground without Satan knowing it. And Satan is simply being made into God's evil twin. A terrific little story by the great Clark Ashton Smith gets into this. His book, The Schizoid Creator. I would heartily recommend you reading that. But yeah, the way people view Satan as the all-tempting one is giving him way too much credit, more so than the Bible. I will admit that the statement about him in Revelation, that he is the accuser of our brethren, though of course that's his old job, that still stays in the New Testament, that he's accusing them of what they've actually done. That might imply that he's keeping track of everybody, but it's just sort of a hint, and we don't get the idea that it's Satan himself who's trying to trip up everybody. He has subordinates for that. The New Testament clearly says that. There's all kinds of demons and unclean spirits around. Let's see. Uncle Abaddon has a kind word. He says, "Thanks so much for all the great podcasts. I've really learned to appreciate the Bible from listening to the Bible Geek. I love it far more now and think I understand it much better than I did even when I was a Christian. You and me both." I just, as you can tell, love the Bible. It's don't believe the Bible. It's not a question of that anymore. It's just endlessly fascinating, even when you point out its reprehensible elements. That's, you can find that in the Iliad and the Odyssey. That doesn't mean you shouldn't read them and enjoy them.